Good afternoon, and welcome to the on-record portion of the Rockbridge Report. I'm Eleanor Kennedy, and joining me today is George Pryde of the Lexington City Council. George, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me here, Eleanor. And I want to also thank the W&L and the Journalism Department and Rockbridge Reports, because you do such a great job of covering not just what's happening on campus, but what's going on around our area. And I think that's important. Thank you.
Thank you. We really appreciate it. We do our best. So my first question is, so now that you're 3 months into your term on the City Council, how does it compare to what you expected?
On the whole, I'd say it's fairly close to what I expected. Let me say what I was warned would happen, that it would be very busy, very demanding, and that I'd be involved in controversial issues, and that has certainly happened. But I would also say on the whole, after 3 months, that I'm enjoying and reasonably satisfied with the way Council is handling the issues that have come before it.
Well, you're one of 3 new members on the City Council, and none of the current members have served for more than 3 years. So how has it been governing the city without sort of a lengthy experience with all new voices?
There's good and there's bad in that, Eleanor. The good is that you can get fresh views, and people don't come into the job with a dug-in opinion on things. And I think that is true of the current council, which, as you say, has 3 new members and 3 with limited experience. So I feel that we're all in the same boat of wanting to do the best for Lexington. And we got a lot of help, the 3 newly elected members, briefings from our fellow council people. We also attended a conference hosted by the Virginia Municipal League in Richmond at the beginning of the year. And they do this to help get newly elected officials from towns, cities, and counties around Virginia to better understand the job they've been elected to and what will be expected of them and how they can deal with the city manager and the public and their fellow council people more efficiently. That was very helpful too. So we got some help from the beginning, and that was very useful.
Great. Well, one issue that you talked about in the months leading up to the campaign was faster, more expedited decision making by the City Council. So in the past few weeks, we've seen a lot of long-term issues like the water loop, the R.E. Lee building. Those issues sort of start to get wrapped up. So do you think that Council's moving faster now, or?
I don't know that we can claim all the credit for that with the current council. I was a little bit concerned, if that's the right word, when we started the term in January, because I had hoped that those issues that you mentioned, the trash and the water loop and the R.E. Lee, would have been wrapped up by the previous administration so that we could all deal with new, fresh issues. Well, in the way that city government works so often, they got held over, but they are moving ahead, and I'm satisfied with the way things are moving now. The R.E. Lee project looks like it can move ahead. I mean, there's a lot of issues still there, particularly how do we relocate the current residents at the hotel. But we've got plans for dealing with all those things, and I feel good about the way things are going now.
Well, another thing that you emphasized before the election was regional cooperation, and you're the council's representative on the Central Shenandoah Planning District Commission.
Yes.
So how does that commission work towards unified regional projects?
Well, they have a committee, of which I'm a member, that meets every couple of months, and they identify projects that will benefit the region and a specific locality. And Lexington has been fortunate to get a high priority place behind the Thompson's Knoll project, and the Central Shenandoah Planning District is helping with that project, and that's good too, because we need help with that major housing program. So I've only had 1 meeting with the district so far, but I was impressed with the people, impressed with the way they go about identifying projects and then handling the projects. I've also been, when I campaigned, I spoke out for regional cooperation, local regional cooperation, better cooperation between the county, Buena Vista, and Lexington on projects. And I would say so far that's been, there's progress has been made. It's still kind of a mixed bag. We had hoped that the county would have sought fit to recycle their trash the same way Lexington and Buena Vista are, but they've chosen to go their own route. And I was at a meeting last night where Max Smith of the Board of Supervisors was asked to explain the county's point of view on that, and I heard what he had to say, and I understand it. I still wish that they might have, I think it might have been better off all around if all three jurisdictions had decided to treat their trash in the same way. But the county had its own reasons for doing what they're doing. We have made progress in resolving issues like the water loop around Lexington. That's been signed off on. And we have a committee that meets, to economic planning committee that includes representatives from all three jurisdictions, and I believe there's a W&L rep and a VMI rep. And so far I believe that committee has been making good progress in getting common needs identified. That's the key thing, is to agree on what we all want to do, and then we'll find a way to do it. So yeah, progress needs to be made on cooperation, but I think it's happening.
That's great. Well, another committee that you're serving on as part of the City Council is the Sesquicentennial Committee. So
Yes.
what can Lexington residents expect in the coming years in terms of Civil War commemoration?
Well, there's going to be a lot. I've only been at one meeting of the Sesquicentennial Commission. There'll be a lot of what you might expect with the Civil War. We're being careful not to call it a celebration, but an observance, because just the very word Civil War can rub some people the wrong way. And there are many, many who feel that we just put too much emphasis on the Civil War here. But it's an important part of our history, and I came here in part because I was fascinated with our history. I think what you can expect will be a lot of what you might expect, which will be reenactments and battlefield tours and things like that. My voice on the commission, and I'm not alone, a couple others have said the same thing, is that we hope the commission will find a way to go beyond just the battlefields and the enactments and look a little deeper into what this event 150 years ago meant and means for Americans today. Why is it we all tend to interpret the Civil War in different ways, positive or negative, depending on who you are and where you're coming from, and how that, if you will, how our reactions to the Civil War have changed over the years. And I think that if they can find a way to maybe have a few seminars included where they get noted Civil War historians who've looked at the war not just from the battles but from the standpoint of the larger meaning, what does it mean for all of us, that would be helpful.
That's great. Well, one issue that's on a lot of citizens' minds in Lexington related to the Civil War commemoration is the Confederate flag issue.
Yeah.
So how do you think the city should be handling this controversy?
Well, I think we're going about it in the right way, in that our city attorney is researching the issue and preparing a position paper, and I'm hopeful, guardedly hopeful, that we can come up with a ordinance, if that's the right term, on display of flags that will be acceptable to all parties. I personally don't object to the Civil War groups displaying flags, provided they're not the one flag that so offends people, particularly minorities in our area. And I consider that flag to be illegitimate in that it's not really a Civil War flag, it's a post-war flag. If they display flags like the national flags of the Confederacy, as they did in January when we reluctantly agreed that they could display their flags during the Lee, Jackson, Martin Luther King holiday, but just before the holiday, not actually during the 3 days. I wouldn't object to that, but I know there are people who will object to any kind of Civil War flag being displayed, and I'm just hopeful that we'll come up with a policy that most, if not everybody, can get behind.
Okay. Well, it's obvious that you're very interested in the Civil War, as you mentioned. You
Yes.
also volunteer at the Stonewall Jackson House.
Yes.
So did this interest in the Civil War, did it come about before or after you came to town, and has living here increased it, changed it, modified it?
I've been interested in the Civil War since I was growing up in Wyoming, where there were 0, count 'em, battles of the Civil War fought. But I never had a chance to really get involved until retired, and until being retired, and then moved to Lexington. And the first thing that my late wife and I did was we joined the Rockbridge Historical Society, and the second thing was we enlisted to tour guides at Stonewall Jackson House, which I'm still doing every Tuesday afternoon now after 13 years. So yeah, it's been a chance to indulge history. But again, I can't help but saying I wish we could look at that history on a deeper level than just what the battles were.
Well, you mentioned growing up in Wyoming, and I know you're a bit of a world traveler. You've lived in, I think, is it 12 states and 2 countries?
Something like that, yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about how you wound up in Lexington, Virginia?
Well, my late wife and I started planning retirement back in '95. We were living in the New York City area where I worked in advertising, and we knew we liked the upper South area, so we spent trips coming down looking at western North Carolina, central North Carolina, eastern North Carolina, Virginia, and the first time we saw Lexington, we said, this might be it. Took another 2 years to find out. We bought a farm in northern Rockbridge County, which I owned until the year after my wife died. And I met Betty Taylor, who's got long roots in Lexington and strong connections with Washington and Lee. And well, she said, George, I got to tell you something. I'm not a country mouse, I'm a city mouse. I said, I'm ready to sell that farm and move into town. So I've been a resident of the big city now since '06.
Wow.
And this is a bigger city than most towns in Wyoming, by the way.
Is it bigger than where you grew up?
The town I grew up in had about 150 people, and the year after I got out of high school, they turned the lights off and closed the town and carted the houses away. You can't even find it anymore. It's one of those, yeah. So,
wow.
Yes, much bigger.
All right, well, I think that's all we have time for here, George.
Okay.
So thank you again so much for joining me. Thank you for joining us. I'm Eleanor Kennedy for today's On Record portion of the Rockbridge Report.